Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I didn't exactly take a day off yesterday, but certainly didn't record a podcast. We were gearing up here at my day job at 740 KTRH, running the board, gearing up for Hurricane Laura. So, needless to say, I was a little too busy yesterday to record a podcast, so I apologize. Figure out how you can donate to the relief effort in Louisiana and Arkansas and anywhere else that's going to need it as the tropical, what is it right now? As of recording, tropical storm, tropical depression. Thoughts and prayers are great. If that's all you can offer, please do. When you're suffering, I know we've talked about this before on the show, you know, all the negativity towards the phrase thoughts and prayers, but at the end of the day, if you're suffering, at the very least, it's good to know that you're being thought of, that you are not alone. No matter what we're going through in life, it's just nice to know sometimes that we are not alone. But if you can help and you can donate, please do to the Hurricane Laura relief efforts. I'm okay here in Houston. It doesn't get much closer than that as far as a catastrophic hurricane coming close to your town. Before I move on to the meat and potatoes, I just want to stress one thing. In the past episodes, I brought this concept up before that, you know, when you're wishing for a hurricane not to hit you, effectively you are basically, you know, wishing that it hits somebody else. There's kind of no getting around that. I just want to reiterate, you do not want anybody to suffer. I do not want anybody on this earth to suffer. It sucks. It sucks when you wish and you hope that a hurricane doesn't hit you. It doesn't make your heart feel any better. It's still just, your heart sinks. Anytime there's a hurricane in the Gulf, your heart sinks. Any rational human being with a conscience, your heart sinks. A typhoon elsewhere in the world, any sort of natural disaster, you don't want it to happen to anybody. So my heart goes out to everybody affected because I have been affected by hurricanes in the past and natural disasters. It's terrible. Nobody wants anybody to suffer. So please reach out if you know somebody who is suffering, who's gone through a hard time, natural disaster, needs help, reach out to see how you can help them. I know a lot of times we are thousands of miles away. And maybe that person you reach out to, maybe it's collectively, just, hey, I know, you know, money helps. If you can financially assist in some way, if you can physically assist in some way, but at the very least, there are still a lot of people in the world who just want to be thought of and not forgotten. I don't know why I'm reminded of this. I was driving to work today, and the past several days in a row that I've driven to work, there's been a homeless man. I mean, that's not anything strange. You see homeless people every single day. There's always a homeless person at this intersection that I'm talking about right now. But the past several days, couple weeks, it's been the exact same man at the exact same intersection, at the exact same spot. And I see him almost 5 days a week. I don't know what his routine is, but our routines have kind of synced up, if that makes sense. He's at the corner around the time that I always pull up to that corner. I always pull up to that intersection at around, I would say, 11:48 a.m. Between 11:45 and 11:48, I am at this intersection. The intersection is the intersection of Highway 90, US 90/Main Street, and 610. There's a Whataburger on the corner. There's a gas station across the street. It's near Reliant. It's near NRG and the Astrodome. You know exactly, Houstonians, you know exactly the intersection I'm talking about. So I'm coming from Missouri City. I'm coming down US 90 and taking a left onto 610 to get to work to the Galleria. Anyways, this guy is always there. And I never have any cash on me, and I never have any change on me. If I did have change, I would give him change. But every time I see him, it's like we have this bond. We haven't spoken before. But he always kind of knows I'm coming. I'm either in my wife's car or the DeLorean. The DeLorean is always, it's recognizable. But no matter what car I'm in, when I go by, whether I can stop next to him or most of the time I'm just going through the intersection, don't have money to give him, but I just give him the peace sign. I look at him and I give him the peace sign, and he always nods and gives me the peace sign back. And even though I didn't give him any money, I think he just appreciates being acknowledged. How often do we avert our eyes from the homeless? How often do we avert our eyes from those suffering? I wouldn't say that we ignore it, because I don't think that is ignoring, and I think that's willfully looking the other way. But homeless people are not thought of in the brightest light. They're not thought of as high-functioning members of society, and they're human beings. So at the very least, it's not change, but give him a peace sign, acknowledge his existence. And he seems to really appreciate that. Most homeless that I give the peace sign to or acknowledge seem to really appreciate being seen. Not being judged, but having their humanity acknowledged. I don't know. I'm just getting that off my chest. I'm just venting about it. Just to, I don't know, maybe make myself feel better. Maybe help put a little good into the world. Maybe if you're out driving around next time and you see a homeless person, instead of ignoring, just see how it goes to give them a peace sign or a nod or a wave, even if you don't have any money to give them. Or don't listen to anything I say, and I'm just a podcast. Go about your day. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes. We are around 7 minutes right now. While I'm thinking about it, when I put the timestamps in the titles and the descriptions, so it might say flight simulator topic, the timestamp might say something like 7.5 minutes. That's from the time that you hear the Geek Therapy Radio intro. That's where that timestamp stems from, because I don't know how you're listening to the podcast, what app you're using, what service you're using, but most of the time they tend to put ads everywhere. They'll put ads at the beginning of the podcast. So if I put a timestamp on here that says it says 8 minutes, 8:00, that might actually be 9.5 minutes into what you're listening to. So the timestamp is from the moment you hear Geek Therapy Radio, from the start of my actual content. That's what the timestamp means. I wish I could control what ads go before my podcast. I don't see a freaking dime from those ads. It's just the cost, I guess, from being able to use their service, upload to their service. I wish I saw some money from it, but I don't. I'm not going to get into the financials of Geek Therapy Radio right now, but something is fishy there. I should be seeing some dimes from there. Ooh, that reminds me. While I'm at it, I haven't done this in recently enough, and I need to do it right now before I forget again. I apologize. I've got a new patron on Patreon, and I would like to acknowledge my patrons right now because they deserve it. Part of becoming a patron on Patreon is that you get on-air shout-outs and shout-outs on the podcast. So, Mike, thank you very, very much for your patronage. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. I'll just say Mike C. I won't use their last name here in the podcast or on the air. But Mike C., thank you very, very much. Who else is on here? Do I need to give a shout-out to? Podcast shout-out. Francis, thank you so very much for your donations, for your patronage on podcast. Who else here? Nathan. Nate's been on the show. It says I owe him an on-air shout-out, too, on the radio show, so I'll be sure to give him a shout-out. Nate, thank you very much for your patronage as well. Am I missing anybody? So we got Mike C. We got, I think that's it. Think I'm all caught up here. Mike, Francis, Nate, thank you so much for your patronage. And I have a new patron I would like to give a personal shout out to. Up North Geek, thank you very much for your patronage. It feels good to give a shout out to my patrons. Feels very good, and it feels very good to have your support. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, all of you. If you want to become a patron of Geek Therapy Radio, I'll just mention some perks right now. Usually, every once in a while, I upload a video that I don't upload to YouTube, or that I don't... It's usually a video that... Usually, I don't upload it to YouTube. For instance, there is a super long video on my Patreon right now. I think it's almost an hour long, if not a little bit over, where I'm just exploring my new-to-me Compaq 286E Desk Pro. And we go over the internals, and you're just on a journey with me as I basically figure it out and look at it and fire it up and try to install Windows 3.1. It's kind of a fun video if you're into that type of thing. Also, extended interviews with Colin and the 8-Bit Guy, and anytime I have content that I don't put on the podcast. For instance, I had an interview recently with Colin from This Does Not Compute, maybe a couple months ago. Well, we talked it was something like darn near 3 hours. It was well over 2 hours. Really, when I book Colin on the show, it's like, let's just talk for 30 minutes, give me some content, and I can put it on the radio show, something to work with. But Colin and I don't do it like that. We always wind up talking for a very, very long time. So the Patreon is a great place to put those extended discussions. So that's on Patreon as well. If you want more information on Patreon, just go to geektherapyradio.com. You'll see like a merch tab and a Patreon support tab. But geektherapyradio.com, the homepage is just a contact form. You don't have to buy anything or give me anything. It's just a contact form. Tell me about your geek thing or questions, comments, whatever. You just want to say what's up. Feel free to do so. geektherapyradio.com. Okay. Meat and potatoes, for sure. Timestamped at 12:29. Microsoft Flight Simulator. I was wrong. I've been thinking about it for the past few days, past week or so, ever since I first was able to start playing Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. After getting it downloaded to my desktop PC and finally getting it working on my laptop. Quick side note about getting it working on my laptop. All I did was I copied the folder that downloaded successfully. This is a little tip for anybody having issues, if you're still having issues. I just copied the download folder, the folder it downloads into. By default, it's under your user, show hidden folders, apt data, roaming, Microsoft Flight Simulator, whatever it is, that huge folder that's 105 gigabytes or 90 gigabytes. And I copied it to an external hard drive. Then I hooked up that external hard drive to my laptop, and I copied the folder into the correct place on the laptop, and it worked. So anyways, I've been spending more time with Flight Simulator. It's still glitchy, still will just crash, for lack of a better word. You'll be halfway through a flight and it'll just, the window goes away, gone. It just crashes, and it's the same thing on my desktop PC and my laptop, same thing. So it's a little glitchy. It's really fun when you're playing it. It's really fun. My issues may not be your issues. It may just be unlucky with my hardware, but for the most part, it runs just fine, other than the sporadic crashing here and there. That's unexplainable. I don't know why that's happening. But I've been spending more time on Flight Simulator, and I was the more time I've been spending with it, the more I just realized that I've been completely 100% wrong in my assessments on my opinion of who Flight Simulator is for. And basically, I said that if you have a passing interest, if you're not interested in flight simulators or simulators in general or aviation, then Flight Simulator is not for you. That was my opinion. But the more time I've been spending with it, that's wrong. I think that Flight Simulator, if you've had no interest in flight simulation, and if you had no interest in aviation, I still think you would have fun with Flight Simulator. I know that's a complete 180 turn, but we're human beings, and I'll be the first to admit I can eat my words sometimes or change my opinion based on having more experiences, maybe more data ahead of me. It's not a fault to change your opinion. You don't have to be, I'm not making it political, you don't have to be entrenched to one side or the other about any issue in general. You can be presented new data, have new experiences, and change your mind. It's fine. So I am changing my mind in my initial analysis of who I think Flight Simulator is for. I think it's for everybody. If you've seen the hype for Flight Simulator and you've been curious about it, and you have $60 to spend on it, to buy it if you want to purchase an actual copy for yourself, I think $60 is fair. Even if you wait for it to be on sale, $30, $20, I don't know I don't think that's going to be anytime soon. But no matter how you purchase it, when you purchase it, for how much you purchase it for, Flight Simulator 2020 is for everybody. And now I'll explain why. While in my previous statements, and it still kind of holds true, as of right now, there is not a whole ton of missions or side games, if that's what you want to call it. There's not enough kind of side content to keep the more action enthusiast. Oh, it just crashed. I had it on behind me in my laptop. I'm looking at my desktop again. Interesting. Here's my wallpaper. Anyways, if you're more into action games and first-person shooters and everything, I still think that there's not a ton to hold your interest for very long on the surface. But I'm changing my tune a little bit. First of all, we are only as of recording, we're only a couple weeks into the public release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Microsoft said they're going to support Flight Simulator 2020 for at least a decade. That means we haven't even scratched the surface of what's to come. There's no helicopters yet. There's no gliders yet. There's no fighter jets yet. There's no Wright brothers' first airplane yet. Who freaking knows what's going to be available in Flight Simulator in the weeks, months, and years to come? The aircraft, missions, it's not. You don't call it a side quest because there's nothing to actually. No one beats Flight Simulator. There's a lot more content to come. There's going to be a lot more content to satiate a much wider breadth of gaming palettes. If you want action, there's going to be DLC coming out, more content that's going to be more action related. Dogfights, air-to-air dogfights, maybe military style mission. I don't know. I don't know. All I do know is that there is more coming out, that the game is constantly going to be developed and added content to suit more tastes. So while right now it may seem sparse in as far as missions, if you're the type of gamer that you need to start off with an objective and then meet that objective and check that off the list that you completed it, right now there's not a whole ton of that in Flight Simulator, but there will be. But here's the real reason why I think even right now Flight Simulator appeals to a much wider audience than my initial thoughts. Flight Simulator 2020 is the ultimate sandbox game. If you like open world, exploring, first person, just go do whatever you want in the game. Grand Theft Auto is a good example, even though Flight Simulator and Grand Theft Auto are nowhere near the same thing. But Grand Theft Auto is open world. Sure, you can complete missions if you want to. Same thing with Just Cause. Just Cause 2, 3, 4, all of it. It's open world. It's a sandbox. You can do whatever you want. You can either play missions or just explore and wreak havoc wherever you want. You don't have to beat the game, so to speak. So Flight Simulator 2020 is the entire world. It's the fully mapped, generated entire face of the planet. 2 petabytes worth of data. It's the entire every square inch of the world. It is the ultimate sandbox game. There are you can go into drone modes basically where you can set your plane wherever you want in the world and then detach the camera and just fly around the entire surface of the globe. You can walk around neighborhoods. There's not actual footsteps, but you can move the camera through neighborhoods, check to see if a store that you went to as a kid is still there, check to see if the house you grew up in is still there, check to see if your school is still there. You can do all of that. It's you will spend hours upon hours upon hours upon hours exploring the entire planet Earth, going to jungles and looking at savannas and things in Africa and watching elephants and giraffes and animals and birds. You can just do a whole lot of exploring. There's going to be people that pick up Microsoft Flight Simulator who don't know how to fly, who have no interest in even flying an airplane. They're just going to set the plane in some spot of the world and then just explore that part of the world. You want to explore Mount Everest? Just go walk around Mount Everest. Take a drone around virtually Mount Everest and just take a peek around all the Himalayas and go to Paris, go to New York City and just look around. It's the ultimate sandbox game. It's also a very soothing game. If you just want to take a break from it all and take in some scenery, you can start if you want a rain shower, if you want to just feel like you're out in the middle of your backyard and set the clouds in the sky or set it to sunny, whatever. But if you set it to rain, like the raindrops that hit the airplane they sound, it's so surreal how realistic everything sounds and looks that you can just spend hours and hours exploring and just being soothed. I'm reminded of live wallpapers. Maybe that's not the right way to think about it. So on Netflix, here's a better example. On Netflix, around the holidays, you can set you can basically watch a fireplace, a crackling fire for a couple of hours. All it is a video. There's stuff on YouTube about this too, just soothing. It's literally just a camera on a fireplace for a few hours. It's just to kind of set the mood and calm and relax. That's exactly what Flight Simulator is. Go to some beautiful, picturesque place in the world. Go to the Grand Tetons. Set the drone out in the middle of a lake in front of the Grand Tetons. Set the weather to rain and just watch the water drops and hear the water drops on the water. Look at the clouds passing over the mountains and the glaciers, and it's so soothing in that way. So Flight Simulator is actually for a much wider user base. In my initial reaction and my initial thoughts, I was thinking, well, this is the ultimate flight simulator. It's the ultimate flight simulation game that's ever been devised. So if you're not hardcore into flight simulation or aviation, then you're not going to get a lot out of it. But more and more dawned on me the exploratory nature of it. Another example, and this is kind of where I started changing my mind. It was yesterday during Hurricane Laura. I set my plane on Galveston, one of the airports in Galveston, on the Galveston Island, I think it was Shoals, and set a flight path to, I think it was Cancun. I believe it was not Cancun. Was it Cancun? I forget exactly where, but it was a flight path that basically took me right through the eye of Hurricane Laura. Maybe I started in Lake Charles. Either way, it doesn't matter where I started from. I wanted to go explore, and you can see this if you follow it on my Instagram, Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram. I wanted to explore Hurricane Laura. When you boot up the game, you're looking at the entire globe, and it's the real weather for the entire globe, and there's Hurricane Laura sitting right there in the Gulf. I thought, oh man, I'm going to go explore Hurricane Laura. That's going to be really neat. Turns out it was me and thousands of other people. It was so interesting. You face southeast at this particular moment, around this time yesterday, face southeast, and you can see the gamer tags of anybody else who's also flying, around your area. And there's just a huge clump of hundreds of gamer tags, hundreds of people up in the air at that moment, flying towards and flying in and around through the eye of Hurricane Laura. You pan the camera around to look to the west, look to the north behind you, look to the northwest, northeast, whatever. Look anywhere away from Hurricane Laura, and it's just kind of spotty. Here's a gamer tag over here, maybe over Nebraska. Here's a gamer tag over West Texas somewhere. But then you pan the camera around towards Hurricane Laura. All the gamer tags, all the airplanes flying around Hurricane Laura. And that kind of dawned on me. I bet you a lot of these people in here, and it was evident, there's some people flying like maniacs or just like down in the ocean and crash. Like, it's crazy. It just kind of dawned on me that since it's almost like a flight simulation second to a lot of people, depending who you are, it's almost like the actual simulating flight is second to the exploratory open world sandbox nature of Flight Simulator 2020. A lot of those people probably had no prior experience to flight simulators at all, but they've been through the grapevine, they've been watching reviews, they've seen, they're gamers, they know all the hype for Flight Simulator 2020. So they got Flight Simulator 2020. Many of them probably bought Flight Simulator 2020 just so that they could go explore real world weather events. So that drew in the meteorology geeks, the weather geeks, the topography geeks, the map geeks. Cardiography, is that the right word? Cartographers. There's a whole wide umbrella of geeks that Flight Simulator 2020 appeals to because of the free nature, the open world nature of Flight Simulator 2020. So, to recap, that's why I think I was completely wrong in my initial assessment as to who Flight Simulator 2020 is for. I think it's for a lot more people. Almost everybody can find something fun to do in Flight Simulator. And I'll start wrapping things up with not a singular story. I will a singular thought, because I've seen this notion. I've seen people express this opinion and tell this tale time and time again all across the internet. YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, all over the internet. Anywhere there's a comment section for Flight Simulator, any Flight Simulator, there's a reoccurring theme in the comments. And it's, boy, I remember when I was 5 years old, I had no idea what I was doing, but my uncle had Flight Simulator 95 on his computer, and I just would spend hours messing around in it because it was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen. A lot of them kind of in my boat, saying that back then they weren't a PC gamer. It was way harder to be a PC gamer back in the late 80s, early 90s, just because it was so prohibitively expensive. That compact 286E would cost, on my Patreon page, that would cost around $8,000 today. In 2020 money, $8,000. So it was hard to get a computer back then and be a PC gamer. All that means is that for the most part, most average kids, their experience with gaming was the NES, maybe the Sega Genesis or the Master System or the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo. They didn't have much experience other than the arcade every once in a while with really graphically intensive 3D video games. So a lot of people's first experience with Flight Simulator was that a family member had Flight Simulator on a computer. And coming from playing Super Mario Brothers on the NES to seeing a fully 3D rendered game where you can fly anywhere and do anything, that was so mind-blowing for an entire generation that it didn't matter that it was Flight Simulator and flying airplanes. None of us had experienced anything like that before and had no interest in aviation, had no interest in simulators, but we simply hadn't seen anything like it. And that's exactly how I got started with Microsoft Flight Simulator. I believe the first version of Microsoft Flight Simulator I ever played was Flight Simulator 95 on Windows 95. And by that time, it was fairly advanced from previous generations of Flight Simulator. Flight Simulator 5.0 was the first to get textures and fully rendered, just textures. Before then, it really wasn't much textures. It was, here's some gray, here's some blue, here's some green. Playing Flight Simulator, I should do a little video of this, but I have Flight Simulator, and I tried playing it on my Commodore 64. You were spoiled running at 1 frame per second. It was pretty neat. And even on DOS, Microsoft DOS, playing Flight Simulator 4.0, 2 frames a second if you were lucky. But the thing is, back in those days, nobody was spoiled really for 60 frames a second. We didn't know the difference, I guess, because yes, technically games like Super Mario Brothers were running at 60 frames a second. Maybe not Super Mario Brothers specifically, but technically video games, even on the NES, were running at 60 frames a second, NTSC, or 50 frames a second for PAL versions, depending where you were in the world, how your power, the frequency of your power lines, basically. High frame rate, high refresh rate. But still, we didn't notice that it was 2 frames per second playing Flight Simulator. Our imaginations were just running wild that we were seeing fully 3D rendered airplanes flying around now defunct, non-existent Chicago Meigs Field, and that we could fly anywhere. The green on the ground and the little blue squiggly line, just vector line, represented a river, and it was mind-blowing. Flying around New York City and seeing the Empire State Building and Statue of Liberty at 2 or 3 frames per second. Mind-blowing. But more to the point, many of us, I would wager that most of us who fell in love with Microsoft Flight Simulator at a young age, it had nothing to do with airplanes or simulation. It was simply just a spectacle to behold. We hadn't experienced anything like that before. It was so dramatically different from Super Mario Brothers or Battletoads or Ghostbusters or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, any other game on the Super NES. And going from that to Flight Simulator in MS-DOS or Flight Simulator 95 was completely mind-blowing. We had no interest in airplanes or simulators, but we just never seen anything like it before. So I think that's how most of us fell in love with it. And that's what I feel is happening again with Flight Simulator 2020. The difference is now, yes, I know that in the year 2020, of course, we've had graphically beautiful video games for quite a while. I remember back in 2001 playing NHL 2001 on the PlayStation 2 and seeing the hockey players' faces and thinking, there's no freaking way video games can get more realistic than this. This is real life here. There was an Olympics game for the PS2, and I remember seeing the guy or the girl, whatever, doing the streamers. I don't know what the event's called, but it's that big long streamer off the end of the baton they're flinging around, and it looks so realistic and fluid and amazing. Thinking, there's no way. Graphics can't get better than this. We cannot top ourselves. But I thought the same thing for Nintendo 64. And I thought the same thing for the PlayStation 1. And I thought the exact same thing when I fired up Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo for the first time in 1992. It was so colorful and smooth. Thinking graphics can't get better than this. This is it. This is where we're going to be stuck. Not stuck, but it can't get better because this is the best. And if this is the best, then I'm happy. I don't see how human beings can come up with anything that looks better than Super Mario World. Then we have Mortal Kombat, and then Killer Instinct, and Donkey Kong Country, and Super Yoshi's Island, And then we got into the 32-bit era with Tony Hawk Pro Skater on the PlayStation. And then we had Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, I believe, was that on the PlayStation 2. Graphics just kept getting better and better. Ace Combat on the PlayStation 2. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Gran Turismo 4 on the PlayStation 2 still looks incredible today. Absolutely incredible today. So the picture I'm painting here is that Flight Simulator 2020, we've seen good graphics. We haven't seen anything like this, though, quite yet. Volumetric clouds and the detailed terrain and the shadow. It's incredible how graphically beautiful Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is. But I think we're experiencing the same wonder, a similar wonder. People who have no interest in simulators or aviation are coming to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 now because they've seen all the hype, they've seen how beautiful it is, and they've seen the unprecedented realism and freedom to explore our world as it virtually exists today. Taking actual Bing satellite images, actual representations of the of photographs of the Earth, of the whole world, not just the United States, every country. If you are from a remote mountain village in Peru, I guarantee you it will have a dwelling up on that hill where you live, in a little fence around the horse stables. There's lots of horses in Peru. I've been to Peru. Peru is freaking beautiful. No matter where you live, I guarantee you there's some form of representation of it. So it's that wonder again. Similar to what we had in the late 80s, early 80s, first flight simulators going through the 90s. It's always Flight Simulator has always attracted a crowd because of the wonder of it all, because it gets so good. It's always pushed the envelope of open world exploration. And there's been no open world exploration to date other than Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So that's why I think it is open to everybody and it appeals to everybody. And I completely take back my initial thoughts that if you're not into aviation and you're not into simulation, that there's not much to hold your attention in Flight Simulator 2020. I don't think that's why new people are coming to 2020, for all the reasons I just expressed. Flight Simulator 2020, it's almost like flying the airplanes for some people is the afterthought. It's being able to explore your world as it actually and virtually exists. You feel like you feel like a kid again. We've never seen anything like this, and I think that's what the appeal is for most people. So, I think that's going to do it for this podcast today. Thank you so much for listening. Go to geektherapyradio.com if you want to reach out to me. You can also just email me directly, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. But honestly, the website's the easiest, geektherapyradio.com. Contact form is right there. It goes right to my inbox. I see it. I say, what's up? Good to hear from you. If you like Geek Therapy Radio, nothing is better than telling your friends about it. If you think you have a fellow geeky friend, and we're all geeks about something, who might dig Geek Therapy Radio, you might want to tell them about it. Oh, I've been listening to so many podcasts. I need a new podcast. I get bored of all my podcasts. Hey, have you heard Geek Therapy Radio? Look for the red, white, black color scheme or send them a link. That'd be great. Just if you have friends or family that you think would like the show, that'd be amazing. Most importantly, no matter what, no matter if you don't tell your friends about Geek Therapy Radio, no matter if you don't, support me on Patreon, no matter if you never go to the geektherapyradio.com website and never buy stickers and if you never even reach out to me, if I never know that you exist, you are in the silent majority, it doesn't matter. The most important thing, the most important takeaway is to know, please know that you are loved and that you're worthy of love. You are worthy of loving yourself, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. When somebody tells you they love you, you can believe it and take it in and appreciate that somebody loves you. And you can tell other people that you love them too. Feel worthy of saying the words, I love you, to somebody else. You're worthy of love. Please don't believe that you are. Our brain are the demons in our head. The sickness that gets into our brains, and I've been there before. The lies that just get louder and louder, that you're not worthy. Stop trying what you're trying. Don't do anything. Give up. You aren't worthy of any of this, and the world sucks. That's a lie. It's easy. I know it's easy for me just to say that, but I've been in that situation, and talk is cheap. But you aren't alone. You are not alone, and you are worthy of that love. Sometimes it takes like a smack in the face, metaphorically speaking. Sometimes maybe physically, really. Something. It usually occurs in your own mind. It's not. I can't speak for everybody. Depression is not something that you take lightly, or you can just say, "Oh yeah, this will fix it." You can't even say this pill will fix it. You can't say that this treatment will fix it. Nothing is guaranteed to fix it. In my experience, for me personally, though, something clicked in my head one day. I woke up one morning, I had severe insomnia. Just severe insomnia. I would stay up until 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m., sleep all day until the sun set again, and then wake up at 7 p.m., 6 p.m., something like that. I had severe depression. The world was dark and bleak. And then one day I woke up in the morning, an hour after a couple hours of sleep. I forget exactly when. Maybe I actually went to bed at a good time, but I woke up and something just kind of like, there was like a jolt in my brain, like just a jolt in my spirit, so to speak. It was just like, dude, what are you doing? What? Are you going to live like this? And again, I'm only speaking for myself. This is me just talking to myself. Are you going to live like this forever? What's the point of this? What's the point of just believing that the world is dark and you're not worthy of anything? It was kind of just like a duh moment. Like, are you going to go through a whole life like this? What's the point of all this? And I got up and I took a walk in the morning. I was probably just wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Joggers walking by probably thought it looked nuts. Hey, good morning to all the joggers going by. This was like 2007. And that was kind of the turning point for me. And I don't know why or what happened. And it wasn't anything. I wasn't prescribed anything. I wasn't on any sort of treatment. It's just kind of the way it worked out for me. And basically what I'm saying is don't give up. If you give up, you don't have that eureka moment. If that eureka moment is coming, and I hope it's coming sooner than later, if you give up, you don't have it. And I know I'm wrapping up the show here, but I keep thinking back to that same year or very shortly thereafter. I was waiting tables. I lived in the Woodlands, Texas, and I waited tables at the Cheesecake Factory. I loved and adored the people I worked with. They became best friends. The camaraderie between us. I loved the people I worked with. I hated my job. Hated it. But anyways, I was driving home from waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory one night. At the end of my rope, and I turned on the radio. It was 740 KTRH because I like to listen to Coast AM with Art Bell and George Norrie. I've had George Norrie on my show a couple times. That's all part and parcel of this. Shortly after I snapped out of my depression, and it wasn't like the next day I was just so happy. It was just kind of like that kind of weight of why are you going to be anchored down like this? You don't have to be anchored down like this. You can maybe have a different outlook on things. This isn't working. So shortly thereafter, I left work, the job that I hated. I still wasn't fully happy. But listening to the radio, Coast to Coast AM, George Norrie, and hearing the announcer on the radio, just a promotion for the station that I work at right now, say News Radio 740 KTRH. And I was repeating that to myself in the car. News Radio 740 KTRH. And I repeated it like 10 times, and I thought I could do that. Maybe not I could do that, but maybe I want to do that. So fast forward 13 years, 2020, I've had George Norrie on my show a couple times. I can call him a friend now. I work at KTRH as a board op, and I have my own radio show on KPRC. And it all kind of started from this point where I started to snap out of that depression. But if I would have given up on myself, if I just accepted that I was worthless and that I wasn't worthy of love, I would have never. It's like this. It's this chain of events that it set off. Wake up, go for a walk, notice the birds chirping for the first time in forever. Still sad, still depressed, but just notice things, seeing things a little bit differently. Driving home from a job that I hated, listening to the radio and saying, I think I'd like to try that. I could do that. Going to school. Now I work at that exact radio station, have a radio show on KPRC 950. None of that would have happened if I had given up. So my encouragement to the listener, to you, there's no magic pill that will cure you. There's nothing that I can say right now. If you are depressed, there's nothing I can say that cures you. All I can say is I love you and you're not alone. You're not alone. I felt so incredibly lonely when I was depressed. Even if I was around people, I just felt alone, like I was in this void. And even when I was in that void around people, there were very few people, not that it was their obligation to do so, but not a lot of people were able to reach me. Granted, most of that is because you put up these walls and barriers and you didn't want people reaching you. I didn't know I was going to go on for this long, but my veteran listeners know that I do this from time to time. I would say that this is when Geek Therapy Radio is at best, when I go off on these type of diatribes. When I was coming out of my depression shell, I kept people at arm's length. I know a lot of us can relate to that. Arm's length. I could be around people, but emotionally, mentally, I kept everybody at however long my wingspan is. That's how close you got to my heart, basically, and to my mind, is you stay 3 feet away from me at all times. You do not go past this. And if you start getting too close, if I feel like people are getting too close to me, my way of keeping them at bay was to be extremely coarse and disgusting and off-putting with just the most disgusting, inappropriate humor. And I'm not saying that I don't appreciate fart humor and poop jokes and cussing and swearing if it's funny, but there's a difference between that kind of actual like comedy, and then there's doing that at the Olive Garden when you're sitting around with a group of your theater peers in a play. I'm doing a play with these people. I'm basically living with these people. And anytime the conversation gets around to me, I'm talking about like soiled elderly diapers and things like at dinner. That's how I kept people at a distance. I'm just going to be disgusting and say disgusting off-color things in mixed company just to keep everyone back. And there was one person who, this is when I was coming out of my depression and learning how to deal with the world again. There was one person who called me out on it. It's like her name is Lindsay. It's like she reached in through that steel barrier around my entire psychology. She texted me. We were at the restaurant, maybe Olive Garden. I don't know what it was. It was all the theater people, and she was a very good friend. She was one of my best friends, and she just kind of gave me this look after it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, kind of like, and I felt that, okay, I said that was crossing. No, I didn't need to be that disgusting at this mixed company dinner. And she just texted me under the table. She was way across 10 people down from me. And my phone vibrates and I see it. And she's just like, the text said something like, You don't have to be disgusting. Or something like that. And this is coming from a friend. So initially it was like, it stabbed me. It hurt my heart. You don't have to be so disgusting. The reason why it hurt my heart is because I knew I didn't have to be so disgusting. She called me out on exactly what in my mind I was calling myself out. And I didn't like that she saw that in me. I didn't like that she had pinpointed exactly what was wrong. People hate that. If I can get a little bit personal here, and I've been getting personal, I'm not going to give any details away from about this, but I'm divorced, and my ex-wife basically ghosted me. And when the dialogue started a little bit after, she said, she will remain nameless, she said the reason why she left is that I had pinpointed what was going on with her. There was something different about her. She was acting a little different way for a few weeks or so before I said something. I said, you're doing either this or both. There's no other explanation for what's going on here. And she didn't respond at all to that. She was just gone the next day. And when the dialogue started again, she said it's because I had pinpointed exactly what was going on. And she couldn't look me in the face again after that because I had pinpointed. So that's what happened to me when Lindsay texted me on the table, you don't have to be disgusting. I hate that you pointed out what I knew. I hate that you pointed out, you shattered my whole barrier. This is how I keep people at a distance. And if you see it and notice it, now my defenses are breached. I have no defenses. You've gotten through somehow. I can't put my arms out, keep people at a distance if now you know my game plan to keep people at a distance. I hated that she figured me out. Hated it. But I appreciated that she did. Gosh, you're confirming exactly what I know I need to do this. I hate being told what I know I need to do. You don't have to be disgusting. So that's when that was kind of like the final wall coming down of my depression. It's like, no, I don't have to be disgusting. I can be sociable. Just because I'm an introvert and I like to be by myself and I gain a lot of energy from just being by myself and tinkering with my own things, it's a very, very, very small group of people that I allow close to me. I love helping people in general, broad scopes. I love having this show and this microphone and this voice to help as many people as I can. But I'm also an individual human being just like anybody else. And it's rare who I break bread with, if that makes sense. That's why I married my wife. That's why Sarah is my wife. I love her. She's in. She is in intimately with my whole mind, body, spirit, soul, heart. And there are only a handful of people like that in my life that are that close. But I think most of us are like that. So I could go weeks without seeing another human being. I need to see my wife. I want to see my wife. But I can go weeks without seeing another human being. Doesn't mean I don't love them. There are people that live 1,000 miles away, thousands of miles away. Dan, my best friend lives in Kuala Lumpur. Andrew, my best friend, I have a few best friends, lives in Austin. I have best friends around the world. And just because I don't see them for months at a time, even years, doesn't mean that I love them any less than if they were standing right in front of me. And I think a lot of people listening to me right now can kind of relate to that. We love our alone time. And just because we're not around people all the time doesn't mean that we don't love those people. That's very much me. I feel safe behind the microphone knowing that I don't have 100 people at any given moment huddled around me, you know? And I don't think a lot of people... just a lot, most people are like that. We love 100 people, but I love that 100 people are listening and that I'm able to help 100 people, but it's different if they're in the room and they're touching on you and they're breathing, and it's not that you guys are gross. You get what I'm saying? We like personal space, but just because we like personal space doesn't mean that we have to have a barrier up around us. A barrier held up by the flimsy self-narrative that we are not worthy. So if I'm not worthy, I'm just going to be disgusting and hold this barrier up, or whatever we do to keep people at bay. So, now I'm wrapping it up. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love. You are worthy of receiving love. So when I tell you I love you, you're worthy of it. You are worthy of it. If you don't think you're worthy of it, email me and I'll tell you directly you're worthy of it. You're also worthy of your own self-respect. We are all geeks about something. I fully believe that we start to build block by block our self-respect by embracing our geek thing or finding a new geek thing, rekindling an old hobby, finding a new hobby, something that we work with our hands, something that we do, something that puts things out back into the world. Maybe you like building old computers or building computers or working with Lego or painting or crocheting or playing cricket, baseball, football, sports, bodybuilding, maybe you're a movie buff or a movie critic. Doing anything that kind of requires creative thought, a creative thought process and problem solving, any hobby like that. We're all geeks about something. So if we just keep searching for what your geek thing is, if you don't know what your geek thing is, keep searching for it. Maybe you'll hear about it a little bit on Geek Therapy Radio. Maybe I'll just mention something in passing. Oh, that sounds interesting. I'll look into that. Oh my goodness, 10 years later, I'm a rocket scientist. That was your geek thing after all. So thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I truly appreciate all of you from the bottom of my heart. And I'll talk to you next time.